Pokemon fan games. There are countless numbers of them out on the internet. Many have entirely new regions, original Pokemon, unique stories and characters, challenging difficulty, creating new types and new forms for existing Pokemon. Some sticking to the classic red and blue progression of becoming the champion, while others are drastically shaking up the formula to see what this franchise of goofy monsters is capable of. And yet, there is an element that I feel has been missing from these games. Something thrilling, something that is daring, something that resonates with the emotions of players. It is something that I've only found in the game Pokemon Brick Bronze, and that is... Welcome everyone to devlog number 2 on my game Pokemon Rusted Bronze, my 2D remake of Pokemon Brick Bronze, which is not a ROM hack.
If I ever find one of these lying around again, I swear to f***ing God, I will stop being so polite.
If you didn't see the last devlog, here's a quick recap. The exteriors of Anthian City are pretty much 90% complete, those being all 4 districts and the sewers. There is an implementation of hoverboard and grind rails, some story progress, and information on what will come next. I mentioned that I was going to focus on the Golden Pokeball Arcade games next, and so here we are. Let's waste no time. Quaza Candy is the first one that I made. A simple concept, but it was pretty tricky to set up. It's inspired by classic Snake games, but you're playing as Rayquaza trying to get rare candy. With the grid movement, I manually coded everything from only using a nail and a chisel while reading from the Rosetta Stone. That just basically means I copied from my Rose Cove Pipe puzzle system. The actual challenging part was creating the game loop that constantly updates movement, because originally I wanted to be smooth instead of the choppy version on the original Brick Bronze, but it made the squares move into each other and it looked terrible, so it's back to the choppy unfortunately. The borders are also larger and take up the entire screen compared to the original minigame, because every time that I would try to set up my own borders, RPG Maker just did not make it work properly, and you would die in the middle of the area. Whack-A-Diglett is probably the most how the f did I get this working game of the bunch. On the surface, it's simple. Diglets pop up, and you bonk them with a hammer. However, the whole thing is mouse controlled, so I had to track cursor position using Luca SJ's mouse plugin, making this the first instance that you could use your mouse in the game. I could go back and edit the Rose Cove Pipe puzzle to utilize this, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I also created random odds that the Diglets will be Alolan forms, and I know that they wore hats in the original, but I wasn't gonna recreate all that. And shiny forms that give more points when bonked. This one wasn't actually too bad to make, in the context that there are games much harder to program. Hammer Arm is based on those real-life arcade strength tester machines. A little arrow zips back and forth across the power meter, and you have to time your press perfectly to stop it in the red zone. Do it right, and boom, big money. Mess up, and you get sent off to England. The speed of the arrow was made to be configurable, so changing the speed when needed will be a lot easier to do. Alolan Adventure is basically a Flappy Bird style game starring a Roulette flying between Alolan executors, the gap between them getting progressively smaller. This was one of the big games that I was worried about, because I essentially had to make procedural generated gaps that the Alolan executors will accommodate for in length. I also had to implement my own gravity mechanic so that it's not too floaty, or so that the Roulette drops like a rock. The hardest part about this was getting the collision right. For many times, Roulette bumped into nothing and died. Not only that, but there were problems with the game crashing at random because of the executors not being able to load. With that previous system I was working on, I was just getting really frustrated. So this is the one game where I scrapped everything and started over. Just starting with the pipes as rectangles that stretch from the top to the bottom of the screen, and adding the executor graphics later. It's at this point that I realized how starting off basic is very important. and not jumping the gun too early so that it screws everything later. The only one left is Pokéball. It's basically a skee-ball game with Pokeballs. You click and drag to aim, launch your ball, and try to hit one of the holes for different point values. For this one, I'm not sure how to nail the physics down on a 2D plane, so if you got suggestions in the comments, let me know. As compensation for my late upload of this devlog than what was promised, I decided to complete the Anthian Gym, faithfully recreating all the elements, for the most part. You see, the Anthian Gym from Brick Bronze was very straightforward. You had to collect 3 tools: a measuring tape on the ground, a wrench through the axis of a hydraulic lift, and a hammer through the axis of a scissor lift. The hydraulic lift was pretty simple to implement, just having 6 separate events that hold the graphic and a sequence moving all of them at the same time. The scissor lift needed some creative liberty, however, where there is no verticality in a 2D game. You can only create an illusion with depth. But that's kind of difficult to do when, in the original, these hanging platforms are on top of each other. Instead, I just made the lift move up to the isolated platform. After obtaining the tools, you hand them to Stefan. Do you pronounce it Stefan or Steven? I'm not going to look it up. And after a snazzy transformation, you battle him and get the soaring badge. If I'm gonna be real, these puzzles are quite a step down from the Rose Cove Gym, and even the Sylvan Gym, honestly. You just have to beat a couple trainers and move a couple machines. This is definitely something that I want to revamp later. Some more story progress has been made, meaning that I added a lot more yapping. After climbing through the Kragnos mountain, you finally reach the peak. As you could see from the last time, there is quite a visual improvement with more weeds and different trees that match the original shape of Brick Bronze. You meet with Jake and Tess as they are ready to board the airship to Anthian City. Except there is no ship on the screen, so we use teleportation magic to reach the Sky Island. After reaching the shopping district, you are led to the Pokéball Emporium, where you meet Tess's uncle, Gerald. He yaps about some Team Eclipse shenanigans that happened in the past. Totally does not foreshadow what is about to happen soon. And that is all I have for now. After the first devlog, I yearned to create something different, just as a break from the Anthian City development. And so I created a basic layout of Route 11, the desert route leading to Iridia City. I quite liked making this because of how straightforward the route is. While the path is super linear, the sandstorm might trip up the player with limited visibility. And just a disclaimer here, Route 11 will not be playable in the next demo. I want to keep it limited to Anthian City, and not get too ahead of myself by trying to create Iridia City in a never-ending development cycle. Now, I know that I mentioned the new protagonists in Anthian Devlog 1, but it was a last-minute mention, so I want to give a proper introduction here. They do have official names, despite being able to name them in the beginning of the game. This is Chris, the male protagonist. His design is inspired by the classic Baconair from Roblox, motorcycle, t-shirt and all. And this is Hazel, the female protagonist. Likewise to Chris, her inspiration is from the acorn hair. I believe these characters are the perfect callback to the original Brick Bronze being on Roblox, and the idea is all thanks to the one and only Yellow Man. As promised for the arcade, there are now additional slot machines and a roulette table. Slots are already a minigame included in Pokemon Essentials, so this was light work to include. It was also light work to include the roulette minigame from Pokemon Emerald. Thanks to the plugin made by FL, you can also make different wagers, 3 ticks, 10 ticks, or all in, for the truly dedicated ones. And that's pretty much it for what I have to show. The arcade games are what took the majority of the time to develop, with all that programming from scratch. So, what's next? First thing is, I will finish the one arcade game left to make, that being Pokéball. I will implement the apartment system that is similar to the secret bases from Pokemon Emerald. And lastly, apart from the smaller details, I shall finish the story arc of Anthian City. If you guys enjoyed this devlog, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the Discord server for early sneak peeks. See you in the next one.